I've been driving trucks for over 15 years now, and you see a lot of strange things out on the road in the dead of night. Animals darting across highways, weird weather rolling in out of nowhere, and the occasional eerie abandoned car sitting on the shoulder. But nothing, absolutely nothing compares to what happened to me 3 winters ago, somewhere between Kansas City and a little ghost town called Eldridge. It was just after 2:30 in the morning. I was hauling a full load of freight down a desolate stretch of US 54, fog hanging so thick you could barely see 10 feet ahead. I had the radio off, the hum of the engine the only sound breaking the heavy silence. That's when I saw him, a man, standing on the shoulder of the road, half shrouded in mist. He wasn't holding a thumb out, wasn't waving for help, just standing there, motionless, facing the road. At first, I figured it was some poor guy whose car must have broken down, but as I passed by, something about him gnawed at the back of my mind. He was tall, unnaturally tall, at least 7 feet, maybe more, dressed in a long, dark coat that looked soaked and tattered at the bottom, and the most unsettling part, his face, or the lack of one. I know what I saw. No eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, pale surface where a face should have been. I slammed the gas pedal a little harder, wanting to put as much distance between me and that thing as I could. But here's where it gets worse. About 2 hours later, 100 miles down the road, I caught something in my rearview mirror. A shape, standing just beyond the glow of my taillights. At first, I thought it was a signpost or a tree. But then it moved, a tall, slender figure, same soaked coat, same faceless, pale head, standing dead still in the middle of the road behind me. My stomach turned. There was no way he could have gotten here. I hadn't stopped once, hadn't passed another car or town. It was just me, the road, and him. I radioed for anyone nearby. Dead air. No other rigs on the stretch. No towns for another 50 miles. I told myself maybe it was fatigue messing with my head, but every so often, I'd glance in the mirror, and he was still there. I floored it, kept driving until sunrise. When I finally reached a truck stop on the edge of Eldridge, I stumbled inside, shaking, half convinced I was losing my mind. The cashier, a wiry old man with deep-set eyes, saw the look on my face and asked what was wrong. I told him about the man, about the faceless figure. He didn't laugh, didn't call me crazy. He just nodded slowly and said, "You're not the first one to see him out there. They call him the Walker. If you spot him once, you'll see him again, and next time, you won't be so lucky." To this day, I avoid that stretch of highway. I don't drive at night anymore either, but every now and then, when the road is empty and the fog rolls in thick, I still catch myself checking the rear view. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see a tall, pale shape in the distance. There's a stretch of highway in New Mexico, out past Gallup, where the desert feels like it stretches on forever. No towns, no cell signal, no company but the whine and the hum of your engine. Most truckers pass through as fast as they can, but back in 2016, I found myself running low on fuel and desperately needing to use the bathroom. That's when I saw it, an old, faded green sign half buried in the sand that read, "Rest area, 1 mile relieved." I pulled off onto the exit. The road was cracked and overgrown, but sure enough, there was a tiny, run-down rest stop at the end of it. Just a single bathroom building, a couple of flickering street lamps, and a vending machine wheezing in the heat. The place felt wrong immediately. No other cars, no signs of life. The lamps buzzed overhead, their pale light barely cutting through the thick, swirling dust. As I stepped out of the cab, the air felt heavy, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Inside the restroom, the lights flickered so badly I had to prop the door open for a sliver of moonlight. The mirror was cracked, the stalls rested, and somewhere in the shadows, I could hear a faint, steady dripping. The whole place reeked of mildew and something else, something sweet and rotten. Then I heard it, A whisper, right by my ear. A woman's voice, soft and clear. "Help me." I spun around, heart hammering, but there was no one there. I bolted out of the restroom and back to my truck. As I jumped into the driver's seat, something in the side mirror caught my eye. A figure standing by the bathroom entrance, a woman, hair matted with dirt, eyes hollow and black. She didn't move, didn't chase me, just watched. I slammed the door shut, threw the truck into gear, and tore out of that lot as fast as I could. The old vending machine rattled and toppled as I sped past, the wind shrieking through the dead trees. Now here's the part that still haunts me. When I reached the next town and told a local sheriff about it, he frowned and asked me to show him exactly where it was. So I tried. I drove back out there the next day, but there was nothing. No rest stop, no faded sign, no crack road, just endless, empty desert. They searched the area, even pulled old maps from the records. According to them, no rest area had ever existed there, not in the last 50 years. I still have the receipt from that vending machine in my glove box. And sometimes, when the road is quiet and the stars vanish behind the clouds, I swear I hear that same voice, whispering from the darkness, "Help me." Every trucker has a hitchhiker story. Most are harmless. Someone stranded, looking for a ride to the next town. But there's a stretch of Route 93 in Arizona that's famous among drivers for a particular type of passenger, one that doesn't belong among the living. It was late fall, 2019. I was running a load of electronics down to Phoenix. The night was pitch black, moon nowhere to be seen, and the only company was the occasional coyote darting across the highway. I was deep into one of those long, hypnotic stretches where the road feels endless when I saw her. A young woman, barefoot, standing on the side of the road in a torn, white sundress. Her long black hair hung in front of her face, and though the darkness obscured most of her features, there was something off about her. It wasn't just that she was out there alone at 3 a.m. It was the way she stood, perfectly still, arms limp at her sides, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Against my better judgment, I slowed down. She didn't flag me down, didn't wave, but as I passed, she turned her face toward my cab. And in that split second under my headlights, I saw her eyes. Completely white, no irises, no pupils, just empty, milky orbs. I floored it, my stomach turning to ice. About 10 minutes later, I glanced at my rearview mirror, and there she was, sitting in the jump seat behind me, her wet hair clinging to her face, eyes staring dead ahead, expression blank. I don't remember stopping. I don't remember opening the door. But somehow, I was standing on the shoulder of the road, truck idling beside me. The cab was empty. The woman was gone. I could still smell something in the air though. Damp earth and wild flowers. The kind you'd find at a grave. I made it to Phoenix by dawn, white-knuckled and sleep-deprived. Told another driver at the depot what happened. He didn't laugh. He told me that stretch of Route 93 had a legend. A girl named Lena Harper, who vanished in the 1970s after a late-night argument with her boyfriend. She was last seen hitchhiking near mile marker 241. They found her body weeks later, buried in a shallow grave near the highway. Drivers say she still wanders that road, looking for a ride home, and if you stop for her, she gets in. Since then, I never pick up anyone on that road, not for any reason. And if you're ever driving through Route 93 at night, keep your doors locked, and don't look in the back seat. This happened to me back in 2014 while hauling auto parts from Tennessee to Texas. There's a long, lonely stretch of highway between Jackson and Little Rock, bordered by thick pine woods on either side. No towns, no gas stations, just road, and something else. It was just past midnight when I noticed the fog rolling in, thick, clinging mist that made the world outside my windshield look like a bad VHS tape. I slowed down, squinting ahead, when my headlights landed on something by the roadside, a woman. Standing by mile marker 177, she was pale, drenched in rain despite the dry night, with long black hair clinging to her face. She wore what looked like a faded hospital gown, bare feet caked with mud. Her eyes were locked on me, wide and pleading. I felt this crushing wave of unease. Everything in me screamed, keep driving. But instinct, or maybe pity, made me pull over. I cracked the window and called out, "You all right, Mom?" She didn't answer, just stared, then slowly pointed behind her, toward the woods. I leaned over, trying to see what she was pointing at, and that S when I noticed the blood on her hands. Before I could react, a sound came from the woods, not an animal, a low, ragged breathing. Then the crack of branches. Something was moving in there. I threw the truck into gear and took off, heart pounding in my chest. In my side mirror, I caught a glimpse of her one last time, standing exactly where I left her, hands still raised. I reached a rest stop 30 miles down the road and told another driver what I'd seen. His face went pale. "You saw her too," he said. He told me local legend claimed a woman was murdered along that stretch in the 1950s, dragged into the woods by her jealous husband and left for dead. Some say she still appears by the mile marker, trying to warn travelers of something worse lurking in the trees. And now, I never stop on that stretch at night, because every time I pass that mile marker, there's always someone standing there. It was the summer of 2018, and I was hauling a load of electronics from Chicago to Denver. The route was familiar, and I'd driven it countless times, but this particular night was different. Around 2 a.m., somewhere along Interstate 80 in Nebraska, I decided to pull over at a rest area to catch some sleep. The lot was empty, save for a few parked cars. I secured the truck, climbed into the sleeper cab, and settled in for the night. Sleep came quickly, but it didn't last. I awoke to the sound of rustling, like someone moving around inside the cab. My heart raced as I sat up, trying to adjust my eyes to the darkness. I was certain I'd locked the doors. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. No response. I reached for the flashlight I kept by the bed and scanned the cab. Nothing. Everything was in its place. I shook my head, blaming the noise on a dream or perhaps an animal outside. Just as I was about to lie back down, I heard it again, a soft whisper, unintelligible, but unmistakably human. It seemed to come from the passenger seat. I grabbed the flashlight again, this time more forcefully, and shone it toward the front of the cab. Empty. But then, in the reflection of the side mirror, I saw a figure sitting in the passenger seat. Pale, featureless, and motionless. I spun around, but the seat was empty. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I checked the truck thoroughly. Doors locked, no signs of forced entry, nothing out of the ordinary. I chalked it up to exhaustion and continued on my route. But the occurrences didn't stop. Over the next few nights, I would catch glimpses of the figure in mirrors, hear whispers in the dark, and feel an uncheckable presence in the cab. I even found the passenger seat belt fastened on more than one occasion. Eventually, I reached Denver and delivered the load. I reported the incidents to my supervisor, who listened patiently before nodding. "You're not the first," he said. "Others have reported similar experiences on that route." To this day, I avoid driving that stretch of I-80 at night, because sometimes, when the road is quiet and the night is still, I can still feel that presence beside me. In the early hours of a humid summer night in 2017, trucker Eric Hall was navigating the desolate stretches of Route 84 in Alabama. The road was enveloped in darkness, the only illumination coming from the dim glow of his dashboard and the occasional flicker of distant lightning. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt and the lingering aroma of pine from the surrounding forest. Truck driver's USA Eric had been on the road for hours, the monotony of the highway lulling him into a trance-like state. The rhythmic hum of the engine, and the gentle sway of the cab were his only companions. As he approached a solitary stop sign in the middle of nowhere, he eased his foot off the accelerator, bringing the massive rig to a gentle halt. Suddenly, without warning, the passenger side door creaked open. The interior light flickered on, casting eerie shadows across the cab. A rush of cold air swept in, sending a chill down Eric's spine. He turned his head swiftly, expecting to see anyone standing there. But the seat was empty, and the darkness beyond the open door was impenetrable. Heart pounding, Eric reached over and slammed the door shut, engaging the lock with trembling fingers. He scanned the area outside, but there was no sign of movement, no indication that anyone had been there. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. Truck drivers USA trying to shake off the unease. He resumed his journey. But the sense of being watched persisted. Every so often, he would catch a glimpse of movement in his peripheral vision, only to find nothing when he turned to look. The cab, once a sanctuary, now felt claustrophobic, the shadows within seeming to shift and dance with a life of their own. Upon reaching his destination, Eric recounted the incident to a fellow trucker. The seasoned driver nodded solemnly and shared a local legend. A woman had died tragically on Route 84 years ago, and since then, drivers had reported unexplained occurrences, doors opening on their own, fleeting glimpses of a figure in the passenger seat, whispers in the night. Eric, a man not easily shaken, found himself haunted by the experience. To this day, he avoids Route 84 whenever possible, the memory of that phantom passenger a constant reminder of the mysteries that lurk in the shadows of the open road. I was hauling a late-night load through northern Montana, a route I'd driven more times than I could count. The highway was empty, surrounded by open plains and dense stretches of pine that swallow the road on either side. The moon hung low and orange in the sky, barely illuminating the cracked-to-lane highway ahead. Around 2:30 a.m., I saw what I thought was a deer lying on the side of the road up ahead. It wasn't moving, just sprawled out awkwardly in the ditch. As I got closer, the headlights caught it, and that's when my stomach turned. It wasn't a deer, it was a man. He was pale, shirtless, and covered in dirt. His eyes were wide open, fixed on me as I rolled by. His mouth opened as if to scream, but no sound came out. Instinctively, I hit the brakes, my rig squealing to a stop about 50 yards down the road. I threw the truck into reverse, my heart pounding, but when I backed up, he was gone. I climbed out of the cab, flashlight in hand, and scanned the ditch. Nothing, not a trace of anyone. No footprints, no blood, no broken branches. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I knew what I'd seen. There was no way I imagined it. I drove on, trying to shake it off. Maybe exhaustion was catching up to me. About 20 minutes later, I passed an old, abandoned gas station, one of those derelict places from the 60s with the sign rusted away and the windows boarded up. But standing by the single rusted-out pump was the same man, same blank, wide-eyed stare, same dirt-caked skin, same open, silent scream. I sped up, faster than I ever should have driven a rig that size. My mind was reeling. There was no way he could have gotten there ahead of me. I hadn't passed any cars, any turns, no side roads. Nothing but a dead-straight highway through empty, rural nowhere. I didn't stop until I reached a well-lit truck stop 60 miles down the road. I stumbled inside, white as a ghost. The night cashier took one look at me and said, "You look like you've seen the man in the ditch." I asked him what he meant, and he told me an old local legend about a drifter hit by a car decades ago. They say his body was left in a ditch for days before anyone found it. Now, his spirit roams the roadside, appearing to drivers late at night, silently screaming for help he'll never receive. I haven't taken that route since. But sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night, I swear I see someone lying in the ditch just ahead. Back in 2019, trucker Logan Reyes was hauling a refrigerated load through the deserts of New Mexico. The job was routine, long stretches of lonely highway, the occasional distant howl of a coyote, and endless miles of darkness. But what happened on Highway 380 that night would haunt him forever. Logan was an old-school trucker, always kept a CB radio on. Even in the age of smartphones, it wasn't for conversation most nights, just static to break up the silence. Around midnight, deep into a stretch of road with no lights and no civilization for miles, the CB suddenly crackled to life. "Breaker, breaker. Anyone there?" The voice was faint, distorted, like an old record warped by heat. Logan reached for the mic. "Yeah, you got Logan on here. What's up, driver?" Static. "Then, get off the road, before it finds you." Logan's skin prickled. He stared into the blackness outside his windshield, but there was nothing. No headlights, no taillights, not even distant buildings. Just the empty desert. He clicked the mic again. "Who is this?" "You okay, buddy?" Silence. Then another voice came through. This one wasn't from the CB. It came from the passenger seat. "It's already here." Logan whipped his head around, and for a split second, he swore he saw someone sitting there. A pale, grinning face, sunken eyes gleaming in the moonlight, but then it was gone. He slammed the brakes, heart pounding, stepping out of the cab to scan the highway with his flashlight. Nothing. No footprints. No sign of a hitchhiker or anyone else. And then his CB erupted again. "Turn around." The voice was clearer this time, like it was inside the cab with him. Every hair on his body stood on end. Logan jumped back in, locked the doors, and floored it. The desert stretched on endlessly. No towns, no rest stops, no exit signs. But here's the thing. Logan swore later, that night he passed the exact same abandoned gas station 3 times. Same busted sign, same boarded windows, same single flickering light. And each time he passed it, the radio would whisper, "Turn around." By dawn, Logan finally reached a small town called Coincidental. When he stopped at the diner, an old-timer there asked where he'd come from. Logan mentioned the stretch of 380 he'd taken. The man paled. "You drove that road at night." "Son, no one does that anymore. Not since '87. Drivers kept vanishing out there. Some said their radios would pick up voices, telling them to turn back. Those that didn't, never made it." Logan never drove night runs through New Mexico again. And to this day, no matter what rig he's in, he never turns on the CB radio after midnight. It was a cold autumn night in 2021 when trucker Mason Briggs found himself running behind schedule on a route through the dense, winding backroads of rural Oregon. The main highway was shut down to an overturned tanker, so dispatch rerouted him through an old forest road called Weaver's Pass, a narrow, twisting stretch of asphalt that locals avoided after dark. Mason had been driving for over an hour with no other headlights in sight, his rig's high beams cutting through a creeping, unnatural fog that clung to the treetops and curled around the road like ghostly tendrils. His GPS was spotty, losing signal every few miles, and even the radio static seemed wrong, a constant, high-pitched whine just beneath the surface. Then, just past mile marker 43, his headlights caught something up ahead. A woman. She stood motionless in the middle of the road, barefoot, wearing a tattered white dress that billowed unnaturally in the still night air. Her skin was deathly pale and long. Wet strands of dark hair hung over her face. Mason jammed the brakes, the rig's tires screeching against the damp asphalt, and he managed to stop just a few feet from her. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't react at all. Instinct told him to lock the doors and keep driving, but something deeper, a primal sense of dread, made him freeze. He flicked his high beams at her, but the woman remained still, and then, slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were hollow, empty black sockets staring straight through him. And then she smiled, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched far too wide for a human face. Without thinking, Mason threw the rig into reverse, tires skidding on the slick road. But the woman didn't disappear into the darkness as he expected. She started walking toward him. 1 step, 2, then 3. The fog thickened, swallowing her form until she was just a faint silhouette. But no matter how far he reversed, she stayed the same distance away, like the road behind him stretched endlessly, keeping her locked in that same impossible proximity. Desperate, Mason spun the wheel, pulling a wide, reckless turn off the road and into the gravel shoulder. He floored it, speeding through the trees and tearing through the mist. After what felt like an eternity, he burst through the fog and onto an open stretch of road. The air was suddenly clear, the eerie static on his radio replaced by regular nighttime broadcasts. Shaking, Mason made it to the next town and immediately pulled into a gas station, recounting what he'd seen to an elderly attendant. The old man listened silently, then nodded gravely. "You met the Weaver's Pass widow," he said. "Legend says she died on that road decades ago, hit by a trucker who never stopped. Every now and then she comes back, waiting in the fog, looking for someone to take his place." Mason never drove Weaver's Pass again, but every time he passes an isolated stretch of foggy road, he swears he sees a figure in white waiting by the side, watching. It was back in the summer of 2017 when veteran trucker Evan Cross was assigned an overnight haul through the dense, isolated backroads of West Virginia. The kind of job most drivers passed on because of the winding, poorly lit roads and miles of thick forest on either side. The night started uneventfully, just the steady hum of his rig, headlights cutting through the dark, and the occasional deer darting across the road. Around 1:45 a.m., Evan pulled over at a remote rest area. It was one of those old, run-down stops, a single bathroom shack, a flickering light, and nothing but woods in every direction. As Evan stretched his legs and checked the load straps, he noticed a figure sitting on the far bench under the dim light. A woman. She wore an old, faded blue dress, long hair cascading over her shoulders, and she sat completely still, staring down at the ground. Evan called out to her, asking if she was okay. No answer. Something about her unsettled him, the way she sat so still, hands folded in her lap, as if she'd been there for hours. He debated leaving, but felt uneasy about abandoning someone alone in a place like this. Reluctantly, he approached. "Ma'am, you all right? You need a ride somewhere?" Without lifting her head, she spoke in a quiet, flat voice. "I need to get home." Evan hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, but the thought of leaving her alone in that eerie place gnawed at him. Against his better judgment, he told her to climb in. She got into the passenger seat without a word, closing the door softly behind her. Evan couldn't help but notice her ice-cold skin as her hand brushed against his arm. They drove in silence for about 30 minutes, the woman offering no directions, no conversation. Evan's headlights barely illuminated the narrow road ahead as thick fog began to roll in. Finally, she spoke. "It's just up ahead. On the left." Evan glanced at her, but she was gone. The seat was empty, the door still closed, not a trace of her. A chill ran down his spine. He slammed the brakes and looked around wildly. No sign of her anywhere, not a footprint, not a sound. His stomach knotted as his headlights fell on a weathered, half-rotted wooden sign by the roadside. "Welcome to Harker's Hollow Cemetery." It was the town graveyard. Evan bolted from the truck, flashlight in hand, searching the fog-shrouded graveyard, convinced it was a prank or hallucination. But all he found was a single, cracked headstone near the entrance. Lydia Hale, 1922 to 1947. May she find her way home. Evan left that road and that job behind for good. But other drivers swear that if you stop at that rest area late at night, you might just meet a pale woman in a faded blue dress waiting for a ride to the cemetery. A ride she never seems to finish.